My parents skipped my graduation to take my sister on vacation. 20 years later, I signed their care papers. I graduated from medical school on a Saturday in June that was warm and bright in the way that important days sometimes oblige you with weather that matches their significance. I had worked toward that day for 8 years of consecutive, grueling, frequently humbling effort. I had funded the final 4 years myself through a combination of scholarships, loans, and the kind of part-time work that makes sleep feel like a luxury rather than a biological requirement. My parents did not attend. They were in Portugal with my younger sister, Vivienne, who had decided 6 weeks before my graduation that she wanted to mark the end of her gap year with a family trip and who had communicated this desire with the expectation of accommodation that had always been reliably extended to her. My parents had booked the flights before I understood what was happening. When I raised the conflict, my mother said the flights were non-refundable. My father said Vivienne needed this and that I would understand. I did not understand. I'm still not sure understanding is the right word for what I eventually arrived at. My closest friend from medical school, a woman named Preeti, who had watched the situation develop and said nothing because she knew me well enough to know I did not want commentary, sat beside me at the ceremony and afterward took me to dinner at a restaurant that was beyond what either of us could reasonably afford at that point in our lives and told the waiter it was my graduation and made sure the evening was marked in the way it deserved to be marked. I have not forgotten that dinner. I have not forgotten what it meant to have someone simply decide that the occasion was worth honoring, regardless of who else had decided otherwise. I became a physician, general practice initially, then a specialization in geriatric medicine that I arrived at through a combination of professional interest and, I'm honest enough to admit, the particular draw of a field that deals with the consequences of how people have been cared for across a lifetime. I built a practice. I built a reputation within it. I built a life that had the texture of something constructed with intention rather than assembled by default. My parents aged. This is not a surprising development. It is the inevitable arithmetic of time, but it arrived with a speed that seemed to surprise them even if it did not surprise me. My father's mobility declined in his mid-70s. My mother developed a condition that required management and monitoring and the kind of consistent medical attention that benefits enormously from having someone in the family who understands the system from the inside. They called me. Not immediately. There was a period during which they attempted to manage through Vivienne, who had remained geographically closer and who had maintained the warmer relationship that proximity and preferential treatment across a childhood tend to produce. Vivienne, however, had neither the medical knowledge nor, I suspect, the stamina for the administrative reality of coordinating complex elder care. And after several months of mounting difficulty, my father called me on a Tuesday evening with the voice of someone who had rehearsed the call and found that rehearsal had not made it easier. He asked if I would help. I said yes. I want to be precise about why, because the why matters. I said yes, not because the previous 20 years had been resolved or renegotiated or explained to my satisfaction. I said yes because I am a geriatric physician and my parents were elderly and struggling, and the version of me that had built a career around the belief that people deserve competent, compassionate care in the later stages of their lives could not locate a principled reason to withhold that care from two specific people on the basis of personal history. I had not forgiven them. Forgiveness and action are not the same thing, and I did not confuse them. I coordinated their care with the same professional thoroughness I applied to my patients. I navigated the system, managed the documentation, ensured their conditions were monitored and their needs addressed. I visited on a schedule that was regular without being more than I could sustain. My father, during one of those visits, sat across from me in his living room and said, with the directness of someone who had perhaps decided that time was no longer something to defer difficult things into, that he knew the graduation had been wrong. He did not construct an explanation. He did not offer a justification. He said it had been wrong and that he had known it at the time and that he was sorry. I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked him if Portugal had been worth it. He said no. He said Vivienne had argued with my mother for most of the trip, and the weather had been unreliable, and he had thought about my graduation every day they were away and had not said so to anyone until this moment. I nodded. I did not tell him it was fine because it had not been fine. I told him I heard him and that I appreciated him saying it, and then I reviewed his medication schedule and updated his care notes and drove home in the early evening through a city that was warm and bright in the way it sometimes obliges you with, regardless of the occasion. Preeti is a cardiologist now. We have dinner every few months at restaurants we can both comfortably afford, which feels like its own quiet form of evidence that the 8 years were worth it. Last month she asked if I had made peace with the graduation. I told her I had made something with it. I was not certain peace was the exact word. She said that sounded about right. She ordered dessert first. I told her that was the best idea anyone had had all evening. Some things across enough years become their own kind of tradition.